Hey everyone, welcome back to the It's a Mind Game podcast. My name is Jade and I'm a personal trainer and mindset coach specializing in HA and eating disorder behaviors. And today I am so overjoyed to be welcoming back the wonderful Claudia of Nourished by Claudia. If you have her on Instagram, we work together in the HA community and are just building a wonderful team of women who are getting their periods back, restoring their life, having babies. But for now, welcome, Claudia.
Thank you, Jade. Always a pleasure being back to your podcast. Thank you for inviting me again.
Oh, I'm so happy about it. And I'm really excited about today's topic because I feel like these questions come up all of the time, both in mindset calls, community calls, and even in DMs that I get on Instagram. And there's no better to speak to about it than you, because obviously with the fitness industry and all the different fields and qualifications that can be involved with the health and fitness industry, it's very easy to be misled with the information that we're receiving, even if the information is incredibly well-intentioned. But this is your specialty, so let's dive in. First things first, can you define what BMR is for us?
So the BMR is the basal metabolic rate. So it's an estimate of the amount of energy or number of calories, as so many people understand it, our body burns over a 24-hour period while at rest. The thing is that for your body to be truly at rest, the digestive system must be inactive, meaning that your food needs to be completely digested and you cannot even chew a chewing gum, for example. And normally to do this test, you are in a clinical settings, you are required to fast for a 12-hour period. And also the external environment needs to be at a neutral temperature. So I'm already sharing a few things that is going to tell your audience of how quickly this BMR can become very inaccurate. So the BMR can help to find out a baseline of the minimum amount of calories that we are required. Talking about minimum amount, okay? So on a surface level, this method is pretty scientific and it provides a quantifiable goal and it's pretty easy to follow. Problem is that the BMR and also prescribing diet based on the BMR is only valid in an academic settings. As soon as you leave the clinical settings, it becomes very inefficient and very inaccurate. Did I make sense, Jay? Do you think that you have understood the definition of the BMR and what it is?
Yeah, I feel like the SparkNotes equivalent is essentially it's your body doing nothing. So it can't even go to regulate temperature, because you even mentioned like the temperature needs to be completely neutral. So as soon as your body even tries to fire up to keep you warm or sweat to cool you down, instantly BMR's thrown out the window, because that obviously expends energy. Also, a really important part you mentioned, that it's done in a clinical setting. It's not a Google search or calculator on BMR.com. Let's pretend that's our website. Super quick, because I didn't touch on qualifications when we did our little intro. Could you just go through your qualifications for us at the moment so people can understand that this very much is your specialty?
Oh, yeah, of course. So I am a nutrition and dietetic clinician. I have a Bachelor of Health Science, and I have expertise in working with women with eating disorders and hormonal imbalances.
Thank you. Because I feel like we haven't touched on that in the longest time, because I think our first podcast was probably 2 years ago where we would have gone through all those things, but just a little top up for our listeners. Now, it's really common with the smartwatches that we're using, all the different fit tech that we've got when it comes to calorie counting, exercise programming, even AI is now becoming a big part of the fitness industry. Can we trust apps to determine? Well, I feel like we've instantly dismissed BMR because there's way too many variables unless you're in a clinical setting. Let's talk about daily energy expenditure. So from the time I wake up and I put my smartwatch on to the time I go to bed, it's telling me that I've burnt X amount of calories. How accurate is this reading?
It's very inaccurate for a variety of reasons. And maybe we should also touch upon the reasons why the BMR is not such rocket science. Would that be okay with you?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the first thing that we need to mention is the age. So normally when you try to calculate the BMR, you normally are asked to write down your age, if you're a female or a male, height and weight. But age is very different depending on who you are, the kind of life that you're living, how much stress you have been exposed to, and also if you're suffering from trauma and a high level of stress, that can really change your aging process. The second thing that people don't take into consideration is muscle mass. So muscles require more energy for maintenance, as we know. And when you calculate the BMR, that's another thing that normally misses out upon. Diet is another one, because, for example, if you eat multiple meals throughout the day instead of 3 main meals, your BMR is going to get affected, your basal metabolic rate. But that's also something else that is not picked up by the machine or by the online calculator. Supplements can also impact the BMR, because if you're taking supplements that contains caffeine, or if you're taking medications for a specific condition, that can affect the results. Connecting to that, if you have an autoimmune condition, or if you have a disorder, if you suffer from chronic pain, if you are coming out of surgery, if you have a long-standing injury, that can definitely increase your basal metabolic rate, and you're not going to see that on an online calculator. We also spoke about weather. So if it's hot, you're going to need less calories in general, and if it's cold, you're going to need less calorie. And for a woman, that kind of season is normally perceived on a monthly basis, depending on which part of the cycle the woman is at. And then one thing that I really would like to underline, especially for all the beautiful women that are listening to this podcast and are trying to get the period back and also remaining pregnant, hormonal changes can highly impact the BMR. And especially hormonal changes that happen in women that suffer from an eating disorder or have a history of an eating disorder. And I thought that it was really important to also touch upon all these points to show to the population of how inaccurate the BMR can be, without even taking into consideration adaptive thermogenesis, pregnancies, and so on and so forth. And I'm gonna pause for a second.
No, that's it. Take a moment. That's been such helpful information. And I guess for ladies listening to the podcast, it's really important to, I guess, audit where you're getting your information from on the calories that you need to be consuming, because I think there's a really high dependency on tech, and technology absolutely has an incredible place in getting results when it comes to health and fitness goals. But when it comes to metabolism, our body's not a calculator. It's more like a chemistry lab. Like there's way too many things that are processed and concocted, and like little potions going on within our systems that are so unique to our individual circumstances that there is no way a algorithm can possibly get around it. As I say that, I can imagine some women going, no, but I've got one of the AI apps. And there is some apps out there, and please know that this isn't for women experiencing eating disorders or HA. This is people that are, for the most part, a good relationship with food. They're cycling, their organs are all functioning, they've got great blood work. And there's some newer apps out there that might generate a meal plan, an exercise plan. And as you input data, depending on how your weight goes, it starts to sort of go, well, you need to eat more, you need to eat less because of how your weight's shifting. But again, that's so much more complicated, that system, versus just the data points that you mentioned earlier, Claudia, with just your weight, your height, and your sex. It can't possibly justify or determine your unique individual needs, really, when you're in good health, let alone when you layer on hormonal disruption, eating disorder, and as you said, trauma, chronic stress, chronic pain. There's so many influences that affect our metabolic rate.
Yeah, and the same thing with fitness watches, because we have to remember that watches use sensors to track movement and heart rate, but they base themselves on formulas and algorithms that can be absolutely inaccurate. And they never take into consideration individual factors, as you mentioned, the stress, the hormonal fluctuations, the metabolic rate, caloric expenditure in general. Yeah, and so what I found also in the past 5 years that I've been very closely working with women with disorder behaviors around food and training and hormonal imbalances is that we tend to overestimate the amount of calories that we eat, and we tend to underestimate the amount of training that we do, which is very different from the generic population. Because if someone is coming with an excess weight, for example, they tend to do the opposite, so underestimate the calories and overestimate the amount of training that they do. But for women with disorder behaviors around food and training is exactly the opposite. And going back to the questions that you asked before about caloric expenditure on any given day, I've never met anyone that could survive on a diet, on a resting diet, meaning on a number of calories while resting, which was below 1,200 calories. And if that woman then has to get up from bed and go and make herself breakfast and go back and watch Netflix or study, even when laying down in bed, I would definitely add at least 200 to 300 calories on top of that. And that's just a ballpark figure of someone that is absolutely doing nothing. Whenever I encounter a woman that has gone below 1,200 calories per day on a completely rest day, like I'm in bed, I'm sick, I cannot move, it normally comes with other problems at the same time, meaning osteoporosis, lower BMI, bradycardia, low blood pressure or high blood pressure, and definitely missing periods.
I'm just thinking back to some of the things I used to think as well when it comes to calorie intake. And I think it's really common for women to go, yeah, but I feel great off 1,200 calories, right? And it actually can be quite a common experience when women, and even men, they drop down to a really low amount of calories, they start training, they start feeling good, and they feel like, see, this is the magic number. And I think it can be quite important to reconsolidate that when our bodies do like change, and anything that you kind of change for a short period of time can kind of give you that, oh, like, look at me go. But it's really important to look at the lifeline of that system. And what I mean by that is you might have someone jump on to 1,200 calories because the magazine said to do it, because bodybuilding.com said it, whatever. And 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 18 weeks, this is awesome. And then all of a sudden they'll start to get that whiplash effect. Binge eating kicks in, disordered eating behaviors, hormonal discrepancies, mood disorders, social implications. And then let's say they break this 1,200 calorie diet and then they start gaining weight again, or other things fall into place. And they go, oh yeah, but that 1,200 really works for me. Like, I felt so good. You need to understand that the 1,200 doesn't feel good if it can't last forever. Right. And that's I guess a diet fail of the whole population. And I feel like I'm completely throwing our questions out the window now, but so many people, whether they've got an eating disorder or not, will have conversations at lunchtime, at family gatherings, having coffee with friends, and go, oh, I just need to jump back on that diet because it worked really well. If one, diets are not meant to be permanent ever. Right. Diets are a short-term phase, and then you let them go and you go into a maintenance phase. But second of all, anything that doesn't fit in with your lifestyle and feels like you're pulling your teeth out is not as good as what you're allowing yourself to think it is.
And also would like to mention that what does it mean to feel good? Because if you're in a situation where you think that you're doing so great on a 1,200 calories diet, but you're suffering from burnout, you are losing hair, your mindset is all over the shop, you have anxiety, you're suffering from insomnia, you don't have a period, what does it mean for you to be well? It means that you have a flat stomach and you can exercise at 5 o'clock in the morning because you have a high level of adrenaline, that it's not really the definition of health for anyone anyway. And I can also say that, yes, having 7 coffees a day for me, it was absolutely excellent when I was 21, 22, because I was working at nighttime and I was studying during the day, and I had a very high expectation of myself. So caffeine was absolutely great at that point in time. fast forward to now that I am 42, give me more than one coffee a day, you see me crawling on the floor. So it's also very important to reevaluate our lifestyle choices, because they're not permanent. And especially for women, they not only change every single day, every single year, but they change also in different part of the cycle. And I know that you're such a great fan of cycle syncing. And also for the women that are listening, you don't need to wait for your period to come back to be able to do cycle syncing. You can also follow the lunar cycle, but we are not the little version of men. So we fluctuate based on a circadian rhythm and infraradian rhythm. And plus we also need to take into consideration seasonal changes. So surviving on a 1200 calories diet during wintertime, during summertime, when you're on holiday, when you're working 14 hours a day, that's not accessible. It's counterintuitive and counterproductive, the way that I see it.
I like the word used as well, because you might survive off it, but you're definitely not thriving.
Surviving, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for women to recognize the language there, because it's like, yeah, you can survive it, but do you want to be surviving or do you want to be thriving? And a quick note on the cycle syncing, because you're absolutely correct, you can actually implement those methods while you're in HA that might help reboot some of your hormones, but it's not the typical, the cycle syncing I use anyway, it's not the typical cycle syncing you read on I guess more like health blogs and stuff, where it's like you only do yoga on your bleed and you only do meditate. Like it's actually not that. It's more as a super quick example, when your bleed comes in, your inflammatory markers are at their lowest and your hormones are at their lowest. So that's actually a great time for you to hit it really hard. So it's learning your biomarkers and matching your training to that versus this women are passive and gentle. And if you like that, absolutely, you go through it. But this is more for the women that want to train hard, but they just don't know how to do it to complement their body. Jumping back into the BMR and calorie though, because I feel like we're covering some really important points. When it comes to, I'm going to throw personal trainers in the ballpark here. Our intentions are always great, but when we're looking at calorie counting, macros, again, that daily expenditure, we're not talking about a watch. I guess it's probably more calculator focused. But if you are someone who has HA, what is the downside to trusting someone who doesn't have as an expansive knowledge as you have when it comes to trusting the amount of calories they need to have in order to recover? And that question's more coming from, I know a lot of women who are working on their recovery, and some of the feedback I get is they're seeing other trainers who are working on their macros with them. And again, well-intentioned, but why is it different when trying to work out calories and macro requirements for someone who, for the most part, healthy, good blood work, functioning hormones, good sleep, not overstressed, no burnout, like just happy-go-lucky, versus someone who's had HA for 6 months, 10 years, eating disordered, burnt out?
That's such a big question, Jade. And the first red flags that I saw is of someone going to a PT and getting nutritional advices based on calories when the PT know their eating disorder history. That's already a red flag to me. Because first of all, if you're a personal trainer and you have no qualification in nutrition, you should not be giving advices even in the form of macro counting, calorie counting, or anything like that. And then secondly, it's more about having a proper conversation with the client, is using those type of tools triggering to their eating disorders. And it's also very important to understand the goal of the person, because if the person wants to get the period back and wants to support their bone health, cardiovascular health, brain health, and they're still showing up to the gym and they're still sticking to a very restrictive diet plan, my question is, aren't we working against current, right? I don't know if it's making any sense right now, but I would actually break down what is going on and ask the client, what are your main goals here? Do you want to build strength, or do you want to get your period back? Because let me tell you that until you get your period back, you're not going to be able to build any strength. Until you have a sufficient amount of energy in your body, you're not going to see the gains that you are trying so hard to get by showing up at the gym. Yeah, and also for the women that they think that they need a caloric number to allow themselves to eat. That's obviously another rabbit hole that we can get into, but it's very important also for women to trust themselves and to trust the fact that not every single day they're going to need the same amount of calorie, because that could change. And instead, like, sticking to numbers, it's a very slippery slope to engaging in other behaviors that are counterintuitive when it comes to regaining their the mental health and physical health. I feel that I haven't answered your question again.
No, you have, absolutely, because like it is a big look. I'm personal trainers giving out meal plans and things like that. I feel like there is a 50-50 split to positive gains and negative effects, right? Because there is plenty of PTs who can give nutritional advice that have actually helped people, let's say, lose weight, get healthy, and it hasn't led to a disordered eating behavior. It hasn't led to any healthy, but they've lost the 20 kilos. They're not obese anymore. But I find that when we're looking at women who have been overdoing it for too long, a lot more caution needs to be given when trusting who to give advice on their nutrition from. And also, again, as you said, being aware of personality types. So as an example, I think about if I was to ask someone for a meal plan, as much as I completely consider myself as not having an eating disorder anymore, if I said to myself, I'm going to follow a meal plan for the next month, 30 days, it would like whiplash me back in disordered behaviors, because I would instantly get that, like, well, I told myself I was going to do it, so now I can't go out for dinner and I can't do this because that's not on my plan. And again, even though I feel like I've got such a great relationship, it just plays on my vulnerabilities. Whereas I think about some of my girlfriends, and if they are to pay for some form of a meal plan, they'll very much be like, oh yeah, I like breakfast, I like lunch, no, I'll do my own dinner, I don't like that one. And like, they can so easily be like, I'll extract what's good and I'll fill in the rest. And it's a very easy, and I look at them and go, well, why pay for a meal plan? Because like, unless you're going to stick to it, but that's my personality like showing through. So just, I guess my point of the story is, if you're working on increasing your calories, it's really important to think about what, I guess, enhances your freedom with food and what kind of tricks you into thinking you're free, but technically is keeping you locked in. So let's say someone sees you, they give you a diet diary and you go, you can add in some more chicken, you can add in some more olive oil. Like, you're not saying 1 tablespoon, you're not saying 100 grams, you're kind of trusting them to add and explore. Whereas a meal plan is the 100 grams and it's not creating space for curiosity. It's not creating space to trust our own judgment, which I think if you've got disordered tendencies or you've got that really strict A-type personality, be careful with where you're getting your info and the form that it comes in.
Agree 100%. And I was rolling my eyes so hard when you said 1 tablespoon of olive oil, because I am the kind of Jamie Oliver type of person that spread the olive oil like there is no tomorrow. Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe that nutritional education is fantastic, but especially if there is one woman that would like to get her period back, that has been struggling with an eating disorder for a very long period of time, it doesn't have to be complicated. They don't actually need a meal plan unless they are in a hospital setting or just outside the hospital, so they actually need some prompt in learning how to feed themselves again. But the reality is that they can go back to basics breakfast, lunch, dinner, 3 snacks in between. And also sometimes we speak so much about 1,200 calories, 1,800 calories, but how do you get to that number? Because if you get to 1,200 calories by eating cauliflowers and cabbage, well, trust me that you're not going to be able to see your period. You're not going to be able to see any gain, and your anxiety is still going to remain high for a very long time until you address that and you welcome the other macronutrients such as healthy fats, high quality protein, and definitely carbs. And when I say carbs, it's not always pizza and ice cream. I don't know why when I say carbs, everyone is like, oh, I'm so scared of pizza and ice cream. No, sweet potatoes, fruits, grain, legumes, absolutely. Yeah. They're all very welcome, and they are very necessary for our own well-being, longevity, and also to age gracefully.
Yeah, and super quick just to wrap things up as well, because I feel like we've referenced that 1,200 calorie mark a lot. Full disclaimer to anyone who is still calorie counting and they might be consuming 2,000 and they go, well, I don't fall into that category because I'm not eating 1,200, I'm eating 2,000. Again, linking back to the very beginning of the podcast where we were talking about metabolic rate and daily expenditure, is that depending on how active your day is, depending on your stress, if there's chronic pain, autoimmune issues, hormone disruptions, endocrine disruption, all array of things, you absolutely could be listening to all these things online where they're only talking about low calorie and go, well, that's not me. That 2,000 still might not be enough for what your unique individual body needs. You could even be on 3,000 calories. And because there's plenty of women that we work with who are doing excessive amounts of training, whether it be 20,000 steps plus an hour of weights training plus a job where they're on their feet all day, 3,000 might not even be enough. So just linking into try not to get stuck on, but I'm not a 1,200, so I have to be doing okay. Or if I'm at 3, that has to be my magic number, because I guess the magic is that intuitive version of trusting and learning how to eat to what your body needs versus once again leaning on numbers.
Yeah, and quickly to clarify, we were referencing the 1,200 calories based on the basal metabolic rate of someone that is at rest and not moving from bed.
Yeah.
So that 1,200 calories is not definitely something that someone should consume when they have an active lifestyle, but simply it's just the minimum amount of someone that doesn't even get up from bed.
Completely bed bound, not even getting up to go to the toilet.
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
Not even scrolling through Instagram.
Yeah, I even hear that and I think, oh my goodness, to think that I used to be on that low of calories and train 2-3 hours a day and work 12 hours a day on my feet. And again, surviving, not thriving.
Surviving, fight and flight. You're in a fight, constant fight.
I was on the go all the time and I didn't realize it was cortisol. Massive epiphany in the recovery journey. Thank you so much for our conversation today. I feel like it's filled with so many important pieces of information. I hope the ladies listening go back and take some notes or have had some aha moments. Of course, if you want to reach out and have a chat to us about our programs and offerings, we would absolutely love that. You can send a DM or an email. And for now, thanks so much, Claudia, for listening. Timestamps for all of these elements too, if anyone wants to skip and jump back. Claudia, thanks so much for joining us today. I have enjoyed every single moment.
Thank you for having me, Jade, and I see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.